What if I told you there was a warrior who never knew defeat? Not even once. It sounds impossible, doesn't it? But according to Roman legend, there was a man who transcended the limits of mortality on the battlefield. Tarquin the Immortal, as he was known by his contemporaries, never fell to any enemy. While other great warriors met their end in bloody battles, Tarquin remained undefeated, creating a myth of immortality around him. But how could a mere soldier defy all odds and stand tall where so many others had fallen? What was it about his skills or his luck that set him apart? Today, we're diving into the fascinating and mysterious stories of Tarquin to uncover whether he was truly immortal or if something else lies behind the legend that elevated him to near-divine status. Stay tuned, because what we're about to reveal about this legendary warrior might just change everything you thought you knew about heroes and war myths. Tarquinius was not born into fame or myth. Unlike many legendary figures, his origins were humble. He was a soldier in the Roman army, a man whose birthright was not nobility or divine favor, but sheer grit and perseverance. Born in the Roman Republic, it is said that he came from a modest family, with no expectations of greatness thrust upon him. His early life was shaped by hardship, honing the resilience that would later mark him as an indomitable force on the battlefield. Tarquinius' journey to becoming a legend began not with a prophecy or a fated encounter, but with the grueling, everyday life of a common soldier. Rome in his time was a military superpower, constantly expanding its territories and influence. The life of a soldier was brutal, with endless campaigns and the ever-present threat of death. It was here, amidst the chaos of war, that Tarquinius first began to distinguish himself. Accounts suggest he was unusually calm under pressure, an invaluable trait when facing the unpredictability of battle. While others succumbed to fear, Tarquinius thrived in it, as though war itself fed his spirit. His comrades began to notice that he never seemed to suffer the same fate as so many of their fallen brothers. Wounds that would have felled others were but scratches to him, and rumors began to spread. What set Tarquinius apart from his peers was not just his ability to survive, but his uncanny knack for victory. Whether in single combat or leading a charge, he was always victorious. Some speculated that the gods had taken a special interest in him. Perhaps Mars himself, the god of war, had blessed him. Others whispered darker theories, that Tarquinius had struck a deal with the underworld for eternal life. These murmurs were dismissed by the rational minds of the time. But as his victories piled up, so did the myth. Despite his growing reputation, Tarquinius remained elusive, almost enigmatic. He did not boast of his victories, nor did he seek the spotlight. This only added to his mystique. He seemed to understand something that his fellow soldiers did not. That power did not lie in bravado, but in the silent confidence of a man who knows his place in history. Tarquinius would be remembered, not because he sought glory, but because glory sought him. His rise was gradual, built on a foundation of blood, sweat, and relentless discipline. As his reputation grew, so did the fear among his enemies. The mere mention of his name on the battlefield was enough to shake the morale of opposing forces. Tarquinius had not just built a reputation, he had built a legend, one that would echo across centuries. But before the legend could truly take hold, it had to be forged in the fires of his first great battle, a moment that would define his place in the annals of Roman history. Tarquinius' first major battle is where the seeds of his immortality were sown. The records are murky, clouded by time, and embellished by storytellers. But one thing remains clear. It was a decisive victory that forever changed his fate. Rome was facing a formidable enemy, a barbarian tribe threatening the Republic's northern borders. Tarquinius, still a relatively unknown figure, was assigned to a legion tasked with defending the region. As the battle raged, the Roman lines began to falter, their enemies pushing them back with savage intensity. It was in this moment of desperation that Tarquinius made his mark. Legend has it that when all seemed lost, Tarquinius charged into the fray with a ferocity that stunned both his allies and foes alike. His movements were precise, almost mechanical, as if driven by something beyond human. Accounts say that he cut down dozens of enemies in a single advance, his sword an extension of his will. Soldiers around him, inspired by his fearlessness, rallied and pushed back against the barbarian horde. What had seemed like certain defeat was suddenly transformed into a miraculous victory. From that day forward, Tarquinius was no longer just a soldier. He was a symbol of Roman invincibility. After the battle, stories of his impossible endurance spread like wildfire. His comrades spoke of how he had been struck by multiple arrows, yet none seemed to have pierced his flesh. Others swore they saw him fight without rest for hours, his strength never waning. In the eyes of many, this could only mean one thing. Tarquinius was more than a man. He was immortal, whether by divine favor or some darker force. He had transcended mortality, becoming something invincible, untouchable. The myth of Tarquinius, the Immortal, was born on that battlefield. As the years went by, this story became the foundation upon which his legend grew. Each subsequent battle added another layer to his mythos, with soldiers and civilians alike believing that Tarquinius could not die. His enemies feared him not just for his skill, but for the impossibility of defeating him. There was no glory in fighting a man who could not fall, only terror in knowing that he would always be standing, no matter the odds. And so, with each passing year, Tarquinius' reputation evolved, becoming less about the man and more about the unstoppable force he represented. The first battle was not his last, of course, but it was the one that cemented his place in history. It was the turning point where Tarquinius stopped being just a soldier and became something far greater. From that moment on, his every step on the battlefield would be watched, recorded, and mythologized. What had once been a simple life of service to Rome was now a journey into the realm of legend. Many wondered what truly lay behind Tarquinius' streak of undefeated battles. Was it his strategic mind, the result of years of experience in warfare? Or perhaps his skill in combat, honed through relentless training, set him apart from other warriors? Some even whispered that it was pure luck, that fate had simply spared him where others fell. Regardless of the reason, there was no denying that Tarquinius possessed a unique combination of all these elements, creating a perfect storm of martial prowess. He seemed to have an instinct for war, able to predict his enemies' movements with uncanny precision, as if he could see the battlefield in a way that others could not. Tarquinius' strategy on the battlefield was often as enigmatic as the man himself. He was not one for grand speeches or overt displays of leadership, yet he commanded the utmost respect from those who fought alongside him. His approach was methodical, calculating every move and countermove, as though the battlefield were a chessboard and he its master. His enemies, by contrast, often fell into chaos, unable to anticipate his next strike. Roman commanders would later study his tactics, marveling at how Tarquinius always seemed to be 2 steps ahead. But it wasn't just his mind that made him formidable, it was his body. The physical skill Tarquinius displayed was almost supernatural. He moved with the grace of a dancer, his reflexes lightning fast, and his endurance seemingly endless. Some said he trained in secret, pushing his body to the brink to achieve such feats. Others believed his strength came from a divine source, a gift from the gods, bestowed only upon the chosen few. His opponents, no matter how skilled, found themselves outmatched in every duel. No weapon seemed to harm him for long. No strike could bring him down. His technique was flawless, a balance of offense and defense that left no openings for his enemies to exploit. Yet, even with all his skill and strategy, there was always an element of luck in war. Tarquinius knew this better than anyone. He had witnessed countless comrades fall to stray arrows or poorly timed swings of a sword. And yet, he never succumbed to the same fate. Whether by some twist of fortune or the hand of fate itself, luck seemed to favor him in every engagement. Some saw this as proof of his immortality. After all, how could one man continually escape death, time and time again, without some cosmic force intervening on his behalf? As Tarquinius' legend grew, so did the speculation. Was it really skill and strategy that kept him alive and undefeated, or was something more mystical at play? Perhaps it was all three, an extraordinary blend of mind, body, and fate working together in perfect harmony. But whatever the truth, it was undeniable that Tarquinius had mastered the art of war in a way few ever could. His victories were not mere chance. They were the result of an unrelenting pursuit of perfection in all aspects of combat. As the myth of Tarquinius spread throughout the Roman world, the question of his immortality became the central focus of his story. Was he truly blessed by the gods, as many believed, or was his invincibility nothing more than an elaborate illusion? Historians, philosophers, and poets all debated the truth behind the legend. Some argued that Tarquinius had simply mastered the art of deception, using fear and reputation to his advantage. Others pointed to the numerous eyewitness accounts of his seemingly impossible feats of endurance as evidence that he was indeed something more than human. The idea of immortality has always fascinated humankind. In Tarquinius' case, it became almost a curse as much as a blessing. The more victories he won, the more his reputation grew, and the more people expected of him. Every time he stepped onto the battlefield, there was an unspoken assumption that he would walk away unscathed, undefeated. This expectation weighed heavily on him, even though he rarely spoke of it. But while his contemporaries revered him, future generations would question the authenticity of his legend. As the centuries passed, the story of Tarquinius took on a life of its own, evolving with each retelling. Roman historians embellished the details, adding supernatural elements to his battles. By the time of the Roman Empire, Tarquinius had become less of a man and more of a mythic figure, almost godlike in stature. Later generations would depict him in statues and paintings, always in the prime of his life, his face never touched by age or wear. But was this truly the man, or had the legend completely overtaken reality? Some modern scholars argue that Tarquinius' immortality was a construct of propaganda, designed to boost morale and intimidate Rome's enemies. After all, in a world where gods and demigods were believed to walk among men, the idea of an immortal warrior wasn't as far-fetched as it might seem today. Tarquinius may have simply been a highly skilled soldier whose reputation was magnified by the stories told about him. But even if his immortality was an illusion, it served its purpose: to inspire fear in Rome's enemies and faith in its people. The legacy of Tarquinius endures, not because he may or may not have been immortal, but because he represents something timeless: the aspiration to transcend human limitations. Whether a real man, a myth, or a blend of both, Tarquinius embodies the desire for eternal glory, the hope that through valor, one can achieve immortality in the memories of those left behind. His story continues to captivate, a reminder that legends, whether born of truth or fiction, have the power to shape the world long after the people who inspired them are gone.